7, 6, 4, 3, 2, 1, and liftoff. Now. Hi everyone.
We haven't finished, has it? Is it going now?
There's a delay between us and you've done this stuff before.
Come on. Do you really expect me to learn things? Hi everyone, it's Meredith here. A big welcome to Jen from Jen's Little Corner. And an even bigger welcome to Melissa from Melissa, where are you from? Let us know who you are from, where you're from.
I'm in the United States. I am originally from Kentucky, which is southeastern US, and now I live in the Southwest in New Mexico.
Fair enough. So first of all, start off with a little bit of housekeeping because, stuff. Okay, so Melissa works for Advocates for Snake Preservation. That's correct? I keep thinking
yes.
Something else, and then say it doesn't matter. So she runs a non-governmental thing. So any super chats, anything like that, will go straight to her organization.
And I just like to say thank you to Fred Harvey, who has already sent a super chat of Australian $10. So thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Fred, and also thank you very much for Notja for sending me $2. I would like to say I would prefer if you send it through PayPal, because that YouTube takes like a third of super chats. So yeah, and it takes like a month to get in. Yeah, less money goes to the snakes. So if you would like to send me some money so I can donate towards this organization, sending it through PayPal would be much better. So yeah, and I am going to I've put a link in the in the chat right now. If you wanted to, if the mods could shill it every once in a while and everything. But I do want to say a quick hello and welcome and thank you for joining in on Not Your Witness, Ricardo. I can never pronounce your name. Oliveria. I'm sorry, Ricardo. Callan, Vandy, Aliakai. Who else? I did see a couple of people. Yes, probably. I'm terrible. I'm sorry, Ricardo.
Callan. Hi, Callan.
Antja, Leah. Yeah, so thank you everyone for joining. Okay, so I found Melissa through my my video on rattlesnake handlers that I did a couple of weeks ago, and I thought she would be awesome to talk to. So I contacted her, and here she is. So yeah, so Melissa, what's the sort of things that you do in like?
Yeah. So yeah, thanks for having me on. So Advocates for Snake Preservation is, like you said, a non-governmental organization, or whatever you call them there, nonprofit, charity. And my partner and I formed this organization when we were still doing conservation research science. And we had been working with snakes mostly for about a decade. And we realized that around here at least, even though we don't really have a lot of very dangerous snakes, unlike where you guys are, people really don't like them. They don't want them in their backyard. They are not interested in conservation. And, we realized that it didn't matter too much, like how much data we collected to find out like what would be good or be bad for snake populations. If the public doesn't care and they don't support it, then they have the power to shut that down in a lot of cases. So we formed this organization to make the connection for people so they could see why snakes are worthy of being conserved. And we do that through a lot of storytelling. So of what I do now in my everyday life is, a lot of boring administrating stuff of the organization, but also fun things like yesterday a gopher snake showed up in our yard and we just followed her around for a couple hours just to see what she was up to see if she did anything cool and provide a story worth sharing, which we're still working on. But it was pretty interesting. It turned out, I just realized like a couple hours ago, going through some old pictures, she was here at our house, did almost the same exact thing a year ago, like almost to the day. So she was here this year on July 5th, and last year she was here on July 3rd. Like, just they're such creatures of habit, and it was really interesting to see that. So, yeah.
How long lived our snakes in the wild?
Sorry?
How long lived our snakes in the wild?
How long do they live? Good question. So snakes are a pretty diverse group for something that, body shape wise, they all look pretty similar, but you have some species that are really tiny, like are, no bigger than like a big earthworm. And then of course you've got some boas and ponds that get to be big enough to eat like crocodiles and stuff. So their lifespan quite a bit, or people. That would be another way of measuring them, yes. Small people. But so for most snakes, to be honest, like people don't usually track them around long enough from birth to the end of life to know for sure. But the ones that have been pretty well studied, so some rattlesnakes have been documented living 40, 50 years in the wild. I think, it's pretty long time. I think people have this idea in their head that, like, I don't know, they're short-lived because they're kind of small, but they're predators, not top of the food chain, but excuse me, pretty far out there. And I think like a lot of predators, the first couple years, most of them don't live past that. Like they don't make it past being a juvenile because it's a tough life trying to not get killed and also trying to find things to kill and eat. But once they get to be an adult, if they make it that far, like they can live a really long time. And I wouldn't be surprised if some of the really large giant snakes live, decades even. So not tortoises, but yeah, sorry. Some of them can be pretty long-lived.
That's impressive. I was thinking maybe 20, tops 30, but 50 years is a decent old age for a snake.
Yeah.
Now you've got a commitment there, Mary.
Yeah, I was.
That is true.
The first pet snake that I had, I got her when I was 8, and she died when I was 28, I think. Wow. And the vet, she wasn't a baby when I got her, and she had been wild caught, and the vet said that she was probably about 30 years old. And that was a rat snake, a relatively small snake, but yeah, they can live a really long time.
Wow. Now I want a snake.
Yeah. This Lilith should last about 20 years. And the same with Thyla. Unfortunately, I can't get Thyla up because she's in shed at the moment, and they don't like being looked at when they're in shed. Yeah. You mainly specialize in rattlesnakes, is that correct?
Yeah, that's what a lot of the research that I did before forming the nonprofit was on rattlesnakes. They're also around here the easiest species to watch because they're so chill. So, or the easiest species. There's a lot of different kinds of rattlesnakes.
And
Narrow.
sorry, you haven't. No, it wouldn't be a stream with me without eating. Hey,
It's so professional. You realize our
Alright.
viewers can see you, Mary.
no.
Cookie.
Yeah, because yeah, I was really interested in your research in regards to their social interactions and stuff. Like, did you want to talk a little bit about them, about their social abilities and?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, totally. So, we had originally actually set out to study something completely different in Arizona black rattlesnakes. That was the species where my partner Jeff Smith and I worked on social behavior, and we got turned on to this this social gathering spot for rattlesnakes by a friend who said, "Hey, there's a lot of snakes here, so you can get a really large sample size for your color change." Was actually what we were going to study. And once we got to see all these snakes hanging out and really started thinking about that, also the color change research wasn't going so well, then we decided that was a much more interesting question. It's fairly common with a number of species of snakes in pretty cold climates to overwinter together. And that's always been explained by, well, they don't have enough places to go. There's just very few like of the correct habitat where they're not going to freeze to death. So they're forced to spend that time together, even though we all know snakes are mean and awful and they hate each other. And there's no way they would be there together if they weren't forced into it. But where we were working and what we had seen throughout, this was in Arizona and through southern Arizona, this is like, it's the desert and it's relatively hot place. And they're not freezing to death like anywhere over the winter. And even where we were working, which was like mid-elevation spot, it did get cold, but there were a lot of different places that they could overwinter. They weren't stuck together. And when they came out in the spring, it wasn't like they just immediately split. The snakes would continue hanging out together for weeks. And it seemed like the females, if they were pregnant that year and going to give birth later that summer, they actually never left that spot at all. They would just hang out, a lot of them, right at the den, and then end up like nesting and giving birth together and taking care of each other's babies that summer too. So we decided to try to see if there was something more going on at this site than just a random pile of snakes that have nowhere else to go. And so I looked over like some methods that people use to study other kinds of animal social behavior because no one had done this with snakes yet at the time. Although I should mention now a study just came out where somebody looked at social behavior in garter snakes too, and turns out they are social as well. Similar patterns to the rattlesnakes. And so we looked at when the rattlesnakes were on the surface, who they chose to sit next to, as each den site had a couple different nearby places where they could bask in groups. And there were a lot of snakes that did actually just come out, sit by themselves, and then leave. And then there were others who hung around for a long time. And it wasn't necessarily like just the mommies and young ones that were hanging out or just young ones hanging out together. There weren't really any patterns that way, except that, there were a lot of mixed groups. And then we also saw some snakes seem to be actively avoiding each other. Like they shared this den site and were probably together underground, but they were never together. We never observed them together on the surface. And we used remote cameras, so we really had a complete picture of what the snakes were doing when they were on the surface during the day. And at night, they went back inside because it was kind of cold. And we even detected what we'd call friendships. So we looked at if an individual pair of snakes was spending more than twice as much time as like an average randomly associating pair of snakes would do in the population, which we had some computer modeling that figured all that out for us. And we actually identified quite a few pairs of snakes that were friends. I mean, there was one pair. There's a video of these two, Spooky and Allie, on our YouTube channel that we only ever saw those snakes together. Like, that's how tight they were. And they were both females, but kind of surprisingly, Spooky was one that we saw give birth nearby 2 different years. And I kind of thought, well, if she has a friend, like that friend must, want to nest with her too. But we never actually saw Ellie doing that. I was kind of surprised. I thought maybe the friendships would transfer over like that, but not something we've seen yet. But yeah, they actually seem to like hanging out with each other more than they are forced to, or what they would be doing if they were just doing random things. Because I just saw this part pop up, and it is an important question because I've already kind of done this twice, talked about how do you tell the snakes apart when you're studying a group? Yeah, so normally when people are studying snakes, you catch everyone that you see, you implant a microchip, or you cut off a piece of their belly scale, and so all the normal ways of like identifying individual snakes require you to handle them. And we didn't want to handle these snakes because we wanted to use the cameras, and we wanted to leave them alone so their behavior would be as natural as possible. So we actually used their patterns. So with Arizona black rattlesnakes, and with the gopher snake that I mentioned earlier, they've got these blotches on the back. And the blotches are, like, if you just glance at them, they seem very uniform. But once you really start looking at them, it's like looking at another face, or how researchers identify tigers and jaguars. Like, they actually have unique, odd-shaped blotches, or blotches that are connected to each other. And so that's how I knew that gopher snake that we saw at my house yesterday was the same one that we saw a year ago, because of some weird blotches she had. And that's how we identified the rattlesnakes too. And the way that we know that, because like I could just be making that up, right? Like, I need to have a backup. And so a subset of these rattlesnakes, as they crawled away from the den site where we weren't, as worried about disturbing their behavior, we would catch them and we would paint their rattles a unique color combination. And so we were able to use that as a backup and say, yep, sure enough, there's the snake Zona, who we caught and painted her rattle when she was 6 months old. And we saw her every 6 months to a year for like the next 6 years. And her pattern, I mean, she grew a lot. So the relative sizes of the blotches changed, but the shape didn't, and we were still able to identify her. So yeah, it doesn't work with all snakes. Like with garter snakes, that would be really difficult because they're just striped, and with solid colored snakes. But because the ones we were looking at had those patterns, that's how we were able to tell them apart.
Yeah, my little snake, my newest one, my Stimson's, she's got a little heart on her, which is so cute. And when you look around it says I heart you. If you look at it, and it's just like, oh, I love you too. It's very cute.
Oh,
and
there's a couple. So cool.
Yeah, there's a couple of really interesting splodges she's got. Yeah, but there's one that has a little heart on it, and I'm just like, oh.
She loves you.
I'm hoping it doesn't.
Nice.
I love her. I hope it doesn't distort too much as she grows, because that's just absolutely precious.
You'll have to take lots of photos as she grows.
Oh yeah, don't worry. I will do many a photo. Do you have a particular favorite rattlesnake? Like personality wise or color wise or anything? Or
yeah, I mean, Arizona black rattles. Oh man, it's really hard. I think species wise, Arizona black rattlesnakes are probably still my favorite. I've worked with them so much, and They're gorgeous. Their behavior is really interesting with the social stuff. And, they were what originally attracted me to working with snakes years and years ago was when I found out that mommies take care of their babies. And that is all I wanted to see for so long. And they were the first species that I got to see that. I got to see the moms with their babies, at least on cameras, not as much in person, but a little bit in person too. And they come in just wildly different colors and patterns, and they change colors, not just like the babies are usually a lot lighter than the adults, but also some of the adults can fade from nearly jet black color like back to that more patterned baby. Although thankfully, again, the shape of those blotches does not change, because that would be bad. But that said, there was an individual Western diamondback rattlesnake that lived at a nature preserve where I used to live and work, and his name was Henry. And individual-wise, he's probably still my favorite snake, because he was giant. He was one of the biggest rattlesnakes I've ever been around. But he was just a sweetheart. You could walk right up next to him. I mean, our dog walked within like a foot of him more times than we thought. We thought she's smarter than that. But he would just look there and look at you like just Mr. Chill. He was real sweet. And one of the saddest things about leaving that place was him, and there were some other animals that we knew individually too. But yeah, he was just such a sweetheart.
Yeah, Lilith is such a sweetheart as well. Like, I don't know how she's turned out. She's really chill, really chilled out. But Thyla, on the other hand, she's like almost like a puppy. She just can't get enough attention. So it's really interesting to see the complete personality differences between the two.
I'm going to ask the question that I think everyone
totally.
wants to know.
Some of our
Sorry.
Oh, sorry.
Okay.
Have you ever been bitten?
Yes, that is the number one most common question.
Yeah, I know. It has to be. You're working with rattlesnakes. Have you ever been bitten? It's got to have happened lots of times.
Yeah, I mean, so I've been bitten by non-venomous snakes thousands, because as a scientist, when I was typical science and catching every one, we were doing things that were very unpleasant and I'm sure frightening for them, and painful sometimes. So yeah, definitely got bit. And yeah, I did get bit by a rattlesnake once, after I had been working with them like 2 years, or maybe it was my third year. So just long enough where I was getting a little too comfortable in my ability to judge size and temperament, and just made a very poor choice about a small tool for a fairly large snake. And it was awful. It was scary and very, very painful, and expensive to treat, although not as much so if I was in Mexico when I got bit, and it was a whole lot cheaper to get treatment down there than if I had been in the US, because I didn't have health insurance at the time either, nor would I have been covered under workers, whatever. It would have been out of pocket. Tens of thousands of dollars if it had been in the US. And instead, it was still a lot for a college student without a lot of money, but just a few $1,000s.
Well, I was watching that Clint's Reptile. That is on the YouTube channel, and he did is a rattlesnake a good pet? And spoiler alert, no. And he said that it was like $100,000 to get treated for a rattlesnake.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
that's crazy.
Because both, as you can tell, Jen and I are both Australian, and the idea of having to spend thousands of dollars on, life-saving treatment is just absolutely mind-blowing.
I mean, there'd be very little out-of-pocket expense if you got bitten by a tiger snake or something like that here.
Yeah.
You would
Yeah,
pretty much
you'd
be
probably.
covered for you. Probably the worst bit would be if you had to be flown somewhere.
Mm.
Yeah,
But
that could be the
isn't that
expense.
covered as well? Or I'm not sure.
Not with Medicare, but it is if you've got private auxiliary cover. You're covered for your flights and that. But you'd have to have private insurance. But even so, private insurance for something like that is still is less than $100 a month. So it's manageable for us to do stuff like that here. Whereas for you guys, unless of course you've got good insurance with the work you've got.
Yeah. No.
So, yeah, I knew you'd laugh at that one. It's just that just blows my mind because I mean, there's so many venomous animals in Australia that people get bit all the time. You'd have people declaring bankruptcy all the time from being bitten by something over here if it wasn't covered.
Yeah, no, it's not good.
Mostly spiders.
So,
I guess.
yeah. I'm assuming that the snake envenomated, or because like a good chunk of the time they don't, isn't it? That they don't envenomate.
Yeah, so yes, in this case, the snake definitely envenomated me. I barely had time to finish the thought, oh, maybe it'll be a dry, and it just felt like my hand and then arm and then right side of my body was just on fire. So it was no question. Yeah, it was real fast. I mean, as far as so this was a Mexican lance-headed rattlesnake. They live in the Central Highlands in Mexico. As sort of, I mean, where they live, they're not that rare, but it's not one that's seen a lot in captivity, and they have a pretty small geographical range. But they love agriculture. Well, they love rodents is what they love, and so they're often found like around agricultural fields, and where they're found, they can be really, really common. And there's also, they're like out in a cornfield, and there's just kids and farm workers just wandering around all of these snakes. So a lot of bites happen. They were very experienced with treating them there, but they are a fairly toxic snake, especially for a rattlesnake. Like, they have some neurotoxic component to them, which is more on the rare side for snakes here, unlike the elapids that you guys have there. So yeah, it was pretty fast acting, and he was big, and he was terrified. I mean, that's why he did it. So yeah, and as far as like that they don't inject venom a lot of the time. So it is true. There are studies that show that snakes can they make decisions even as babies about how much venom to inject with a bite. So they can choose to inject none. And I've heard the figure thrown around a lot that 50% of the bites are dry. And I just don't understand where people are coming up with that, because my feeling is that if you get bit, like if I had gotten bit and it turned out to be a dry bite, well, no one would know about that. I certainly wouldn't admit it. I mean, and most people I know who've gotten a dry bite or a mild bite, like they don't talk about it. And maybe a general member of the public would freak out over any snake bite, and that's how they determine. But the other side of that is that everybody, especially when it bites them, they think it's a rattlesnake here in the U.S. because those are the scary ones. I'm sure it translates the same over there with tiger snakes or brown, whatever is like the scary species, or I guess pick from the giant deck of cards of scary snakes you have.
Eastern brown's probably
but that's what everyone.
The inland.
So they're probably all.
Yes, the inland python. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, so that's what everyone thinks they see, and certainly if they get bit, that's what they think they got bit by. And people misidentify snakes all the time. I mean, they're hard to identify. So I also wonder if a lot of times these bites that they come in and they say I got bit by a rattlesnake, and then there's no evidence that they've been envenomated. Well, does that mean it was a dry bite, or does that mean it wasn't a rattlesnake and it was actually a non-venomous snake? And I don't know. I mean, it would be hard to do like a real controlled study because you would be allowing people to get bit, which is expensive and can cause some permanent damage, and is an unpleasant. I mean, no one would approve that study.
Most
Probably
people
not.
who get bit though, they're kind of their own fault. They're either trying to scare the snake off or kill it, and if you leave them alone, generally they will leave you alone because you're terrifying to them. So I remember when I was younger,
totally.
We had a tiger snake come up, and it was sunning itself on our back veranda at home, and Dad decided to scare it off with a shovel, and we're all like, no, leave it alone, leave it alone. Fortunately, he wasn't bitten, but I'm like, he didn't try to kill it, he just wanted to scare it off, but that's not the point. You flick a snake with a shovel, it's like liable to turn around and bite you. It was not a smart thing for a smart man to go and do. It's like, just leave it, it'll go away.
Yeah, there's just that mentality, and it's not totally just men, but it certainly seems to be more common. It's like, I have to control this situation, and just leaving them alone is it. Once you see a snake, if you choose to stay away, you've basically eliminated your chances of getting bit. Most of them, as you said, are people trying to handle the snake or trying to kill them, and handling, than a snake that they think they killed, but surprise, can still bite. Or someone putting their hand or their foot or another body part next to a snake they didn't see. So if you see it, you leave them alone. Yeah, you're good. That's it. Like, all snake bites
weird ones in Australia all the time with people killing them. Oddest one I saw was traveling one of the back roads, because there's a lot of back roads in Australia between places, and the person in front of us stopped. We thought there was something wrong. Got out of his car, went to his boot, got an axe, and chopped the snake up in the middle of the road. And I'm like, what the hell? It was just sunning itself on the freaking road. It's like, what? In the middle of nowhere. It wasn't going to hurt anyone. The only people anywhere near there were in cars.
That's not good.
No.
We've seen it too near one of our study sites. Hardly any traffic ever. It's like a dirt road hours away from a real town, and we heard a car coming down, and we heard him stop, and we both, my partner and I, kind of looked at each other like, uh-oh. I just sort of knew, and then we heard like bang, 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 like several shots, and and then they got in their vehicle. It sounded like they peeled out or something, and then went away. And sure enough, when we got back to the road, like, this poor little rattlesnake who looked like she had just given birth. She was babies had probably just left her, so skinny. And she's just crossing a road out in the middle of nowhere. Definitely not a threat to anyone, and just shot her, cut off the rattle. Always got to cut off the rattle, and then drove off. She was still, not for longer, but still alive. Yeah, it's just, I don't know why, but
I don't get the mentality. I can understand it. Like, if it's near your home and you've got kids and you're panicking, I can understand why people would. Ideally you find somebody to come and deal with it for you. But so some people that don't think about things like this and they just panic. But out in the middle of nowhere, you're driving past. What on earth were you thinking?
I know someone who killed a carpet python. So just a bigger version of Lilith that's green, basically. And it was sunning itself, and they actually killed it. And I was like, why did you kill a carpet python? Like, out of all of the snakes on the planet, I ripped into them. I was furious. And that was before I got Lilith as well. So, yeah. You mentioned that they took the rattle. Why do they take the rattle? Is it like a trophy, or is it good luck? Or?
Yeah, it's like a trophy. Well, it wasn't good luck. I have never heard that it's thought to be good luck, like rabbit's foot, although I think the same joke about what wasn't very lucky for that rabbit or snake.
That's what I was going to say.
I assume I assume it's a trophy. I have never had someone like pull one out and brag, but I assume that's what they're doing, which I just don't get, because it's like I was driving in a 2,000-pound car and I came across an animal that's 10 times smaller than me and I killed him. Look at me. Like, what? I don't, the gun. What?
With a gun.
Why
like,
is that making
stay away
you
from it.
brave? Yeah.
I'm so tough. I have a gun and a car.
Yeah. Yeah.
Testosterone. That's what it is.
I have a quick question. What is the evolutionary history of the rattle? Do you know, like, why, like, what caused the rattle to become a thing? Like, what was the evolutionary process? Do you know?
That is a very good question. And the short answer is nobody knows for sure. It's a hot topic because rattlesnakes are pretty popular among snake biologists, and the rattle is one of the things that makes them so popular, besides just that they look cool. And they're relatively easy to study. But yeah, so the old story was that, well, the rattlesnake rattles because they don't want to get trampled by roaming herds of bison back before we killed all them off. The problem with that theory is that rattlesnakes first evolved in the highlands of central Mexico. There are no bison there or any other like large grazing mammals that you would have to worry about getting stomped on. So that is not why the rattle exists. It seems likely because it's so effective that it is used as a defense, as a, hey, I'm here, I'm potentially dangerous, like, leave me alone, I'm not just some other kind of snake. But people have also theorized that it could be related to caudal luring, which is when snakes, maybe it's called this when other animals do it too, they use their tails to attract food. And so there are some snakes that are closely related to rattlesnakes, like copperheads and cottonmouths, who are also pit vipers. And they have brightly colored tails when they're babies. And they have been seen, and they don't have rattles, and they have been seen using those tails. They kind of wave it. You can kind of picture it as like when you're using your finger to tell somebody to come here. And that's kind of like what they do with their tail. And that, combined with the bright coloration, is a thing that like will attract little prey sometimes. And so, yeah, so they think that, possibly like the rattle came on as like, kind of to one up that bright coloration, like, oh, look, mine makes a noise too. There's also, and I think somebody mentioned this in the chat on YouTube, that some non-venomous snakes will also rattle their tail to make noise. And so whether that is how, if that was a step in the process of evolving a rattle, was just to beat your tail against leaves. And then at some point, snakes that were able to do that louder, like, that it kept going until they got a real rattle. Or if that is because those non-venomous snakes are using it to mimic rattlesnakes, like, we don't really know. But yeah, it's something that people have been trying to look at. There's a few species of rattlesnakes that either lose their rattles or that live on islands now and have completely, like, none of the snakes that live on those islands have their rattles, but they don't have the definitive answer yet, which, I mean, I just think that makes it so much cooler. I like when we don't know stuff.
They don't use it for mating?
No, not as far as we know. They can't hear their own rattle.
Well, that makes sense.
Wow.
Yes, because snakes
So,
hear through
although
ground vibration, don't they? So.
Yeah, mostly. And I think that the range of stuff that they can actually like hear in the same way that we do is high pitch. So I'm thinking more like this is not my specialty in there, I'm more a behavior person, but I think it's like more high pitched stuff. And I've heard that they can't hear their rattle. They rarely do it when they're around each other unless you upset a group of them. Like when the males are fighting, they don't rattle at each other. Sometimes the rattle makes noise when they push each other to the ground. Wrestling matches. When I've seen snakes courting, also they don't rattle their tail. Again, sometimes it makes noises when it's getting sort of hit around. I have seen females And we have a video of this in the series, A Tale of Two Trash Snakes. And it would be the last video in that series because it's when the male Daryl finds the female Carol, and she flips her tail up in the air and basically to be totally lewd, it's like she's very much saying like, here I am and I like you, kind of as soon as he arrives. And that's the closest I've seen to a rattle being used. But I think it was more just sort of, it's on the tail and she's just letting him know her tail is there and available, and the rattle just is an aside. But she didn't rattle it like they would when they're scared.
You go, Jen.
Oh, I was going to say, so it's probably more a case of them evolving it to stop predation on them, but more than anything else. So it's a way of scaring off predators who would attack them. So it could have actually evolved as a response to humans, because early humans would have actually hunted snakes to A, get them out of the way, and B, because they're delicious.
Yeah,
it is.
I've never
It
eaten
is.
snake actually, so I don't know. But I mean, yeah.
It seems most likely it's a defense, yeah. But I'm pretty sure that rattles are much older than the human species.
Yeah.
So certainly where rattlesnakes are, but yeah.
Yeah, I was about to ask, how old is the rattle?
Yeah. Maybe
we've been going for
somebody can
about
look up in the chat for us.
4
How old is the rattle?
Someone else will have to look that up. I don't remember how old they are. It's before us, because I know I've discussed that when I've talked to people. They've been around as a species longer than they've been around as a species, but I forget how old the lineage is.
We've been going for about 45 minutes. So if the chat wants to ask any questions, you can either send me a PayPal through the PayPal link if one of my mods can shout. And as I said, all money that goes towards me will go straight into supporting this organization. As well as, so no, I'm not going to make any money off this. And that's why I'm suggesting PayPal, because one, it comes through quicker, and two, YouTube does take a third of the super chats, of the money taken by the super chats. So I would prefer you to do it through there. If one of my mods could link it, I think Amiga Nuts has been doing a really amazing job at shilling. Melissa, do you actually have a YouTube channel yourself? Or is it just your...
Oh, it's just the organization. Nobody would want to see just on YouTube.
Well, I think somebody might. I would. Make a YouTube channel.
I mean, in all honesty, some of Mary's snake videos are some of her most popular because, let's face it, snakes are cute.
Yeah.
Where has Lilith gone to, by the way?
She's on my back.
She's on your back.
She's too far. She's too far up. I can't say I have a snake in my ass. There's a couple of things I do actually want to ask you about. What's the situation in regards to rattlesnake roundups? Are they starting to die out, or are they still quite prevalent in Clearwater and places like that? Because that's how I kind of found you when I was researching rattlesnake roundups ages ago, and I was just like, this is so depressing. So I wanted to ask you a little bit about that and let you rant. We've got 15 minutes till the hour, but we're happy to go for as long as you want. But you can rant away.
Yeah, rattlesnake roundups are the worst. So for anyone who is not familiar with them, a rattlesnake roundup is a type of wildlife killing contest. It's different from a lot of other wildlife killing contests that we have in the U.S. Most of them are geared towards mammals, and they're done in secret because most people tend to not like the idea of people rounding up bobcats and fox to kill just for the hell of it, not, you know, for food or anything, just simply for the hell of it. So rattlesnake roundups are these public events. It's kind of like a county fair type thing, with the difference being that there are hundreds or thousands, depending on the size of the event, rattlesnakes brought in that have been drug out of their den, often using gas dumped into their den over the winter so they can get all the animals to come out at once, because like I said before, they don't usually do that. And they drag them down to the fairgrounds. They do shows with them, like grabbing them by their head. Some of the roundups will sew their mouths shut so you can have a picture with a live rattlesnake draped over your shoulder. And then they kill them. Some of the events, again, you can like pay to skin one yourself. They do venom extraction for no particular reason, because most reputable anti-venom and researchers don't want venom from roundups because they're not taken in a sterile fashion. They're like out in the middle of the fair. Yeah, and they're gross. I mean, the animals are not treated right. They're not monitored in any way to know what sort of effect they may or may not be having on the wild population. And, you know, the good news, when we started working on roundups about 6 years ago, there were somewhere between 25 and 30 roundups that were still killing snakes in the US. When I went through and totaled them up this year, because I was tracking how many had canceled due to the pandemic, and the, you know, not special this year cancellations, but just ones that had died, we were down to only I think it was 14 roundups in the US. And the US, yeah, so that was really good news, and a total surprise. They had just been kind of like winking out, not do, I don't think, like, I'm certainly not taking credit for it. And I think a lot of them were just, you know, people just aren't into that so much in a lot of places. Like New Mexico had one, and it didn't die because people were protesting it or because of some change in law. It just wasn't making any money because I think, you know, they're gross. I think people just in a lot of places don't want to go. Some of them have switched to educational festivals where either they'll have people bring in captive snakes and teach attendees about local wildlife, and they'll do other stuff like hunting safety and things like that. Or like in Pennsylvania, they switched all of their rattlesnake roundups to these events where they still send hunters out to gather snakes from the wild, but they use the roundups as a chance to count the population. And so they return them back to where they found them after it's done, because the species of rattlesnake in Pennsylvania is one that should probably be listed nationally as threatened, but because they're a rattlesnake, they're not. But they've been using those events to census the population, which is an interesting way to change them into something a little kinder. But yeah, this year due to the pandemic, let's see, I think 11 out of the 14 canceled. It was almost all of them. And there was talk about maybe they would have them later in the year, but it's just because of the way that they have to go to their dens to get them. You can't gather large numbers of rattlesnakes like that without using dens. So you can't just do it in the summer or the fall. It doesn't work. So maybe that'll be enough to push them out of business for good. And I mean, I don't want those communities to lose their festival. I would rather see them reform into educational events, but I would also just like them to stop rounding up and killing snakes.
Fair enough. Yeah, it's quite sad. Yeah, no, I was very, very distressed when I was doing that video which is where I contacted you through, like with the snake handling at the Appalachian place in Appalachia. I was just like, the poor things, and I was like, do you have much information about that as well? Like the
snake handling thing, the churches. Yeah, you know, someone has joked around with me a couple times because I'm from Kentucky, one of the states that does that. It's like, oh, is that how? And my parents are super religious. Like, oh, is that how you got into snakes? No, that is not how I got into snakes. I didn't find out about those until I was an adult. Our church was crazy, but not that crazy. That is kind of a dying thing. It's I mean, even amongst uber religious people, most of them sort of think that snake handling stuff is kind of nuts. So I think it's pretty rare. Like, I know there are some, or at least one church, like West Virginia, Kentucky, Eastern Kentucky, Eastern Tennessee, and Western West Virginia. So in this like small little region of Appalachia, but they're pretty rare. And I know some friends of mine that have a large, it's the Kentucky Reptile Zoo, but they do a lot of venom extraction for research. They send the venom off. They're the ones who are actually supplying anti-venom makers and venom researchers with a lot of the venom. They have a lot of exotic snakes. They take really good care of their animals. They're doing some great educational work. And because they're close to some of those snake handling churches, that is something that they've been working on. And most of my knowledge that issue is from their work. Like a lot of times on the documentaries, Kristen Wiley or Jim Harrison are the people that run that museum, and they're talking because they've gone to a lot of the churches to document that the snakes aren't being treated well. I mean, often the reason that, and you probably cover this in your video, that people don't get bit has nothing to do with God's protection, but it's because the snakes are kept in the dark, like in the literal dark, and not given any food or water, and so they're too weak to defend themselves. That and snakes like that much. But yeah, it's not. There's no magic.
Yeah, because I did watch a news article, and from the little bit that I saw, like there were no hides, there was no lighting. There were like 3 or 4 at least snakes in one container. Like and you know, as you said, that they're a social animal, so that's, I don't know what it's like, but the containers were really bad, and I was like, I didn't see any lighting, and I didn't see any heating, but I was like, well, they could have been using heat mats. But then again, if they didn't even have like a basic hide, I wouldn't even be surprised if they didn't have any heating as well. So yeah, no, I was just going, the poor things. And like one of the footage that I saw was this woman jumping up and down with the one snake, holding the snake in the middle, and she was jumping up and down. The thing was flopping around, and I was like, that snake is not long for the world, because the snake just didn't have any strength to even lift itself up, and that was pretty sad. So, but I'm glad.
I mean, rattlesnakes aren't as muscular as pythons, like your babies, but they're not limp like that unless they're super stressed out. Like having, when we used to handle snakes in the field to like measure them, and so we had our hands on them using proper equipment, not jumping around. But having one go limp like that, that's a serious like, we've gone on too far, like the snake is overheating, this, something like they could die, and often they do once they get to that point. So not good. The churches with the snake handling.
No, but I'm glad that
in the chat too.
You go, Jen.
Anja said, do some of the snake predators bite off their heads and just leave the rest? Because apparently she found one like that.
Huh.
I really thought they would have eaten the
Is
whole
a
snake.
good question. I've great horned owls in the United States. I don't know where this person is, but they're kind of famous for doing that in general, which with a lot of their prey, like they'll go into a chicken house and like just tear off everybody's head and leave the bodies. I don't know if that's a snake thing. I mean, they're zombies. That sounds like, I mean, a good way to protect yourself. I don't know why you'd leave the body, like, to take the rattlesnake heads off, it's off and throw it, and then eat the body, so you don't have to worry about the venom and the bitey. But
It
yeah,
sounds to me
I'm not
something
sure.
like what a pet would do, because it's already fed, so it doesn't need to eat, so it's just killing for the either it's self-defense or for the sake of it, like cats will.
Yeah, that's true. It could be that too.
I mean, cats will kill snakes, so.
Is there any other questions in the chat? Because, like, Melissa, let us know when you're ready. If you're enjoying this conversation, I'm enjoying it, and I'm happy to like pick your brains out if you're okay with that. Because I'm a zombie as well. Brains. Is there anything that you actually want to specifically talk about that you're thinking, oh, we skipped over it, or you're like, oh my God, this is my favorite random fact about, you know, or something?
I mean, I'm pretty good about inserting my favorite stuff pretty early on. So we covered like my favorite thing, but I'm happy to stay on a bit longer if you guys have more questions.
Well, a question I'm interested, because my background is in sort of science. I've got a science background, so does Jen. I'm more of the biology. She's more of the
Physics and maths.
Physics and maths. So, you know, we speak entirely different languages. But what the chemistry of the toxins, like, you said that there's a neurotoxin, and I also researched that there were myotoxins. And can you talk a little bit about the chemical compounds and the chemical reagents and things like that in the venom? Like, can you give us a little bit of a breakdown?
Oh boy, I can only talk a little bit and in pretty general terms, because that people that do snake venom, like that's kind of the thing that they do. And mine was always behavior and more sort of like applied conservation and stuff. So what I know about it has just been from occasionally listening to talks at conferences. But yeah, snake venom is, so just to start the very basics, it's basically like it's primarily used for digestion, to help them digest. And so we think it evolved from that, is to just be like a very like complex and just like super digestive. So yes, it does help subdue and kill prey in some species. There's a lot of snakes that are thought of throughout the world that are thought of as, and they are harmless and they're thought of as non-venomous, but they actually have like mild venom. Like I have had a couple of captives, have one currently, a hognose snake, who, you know, is classified as a harmless snake. You'll never hear them anything, but they do have mild venom that's used to sort of stun their prey and make it a little harder for them to fight. But most of the time, those venoms also help the snakes by digesting from the inside. And so snakes, for the most part, because they don't have any limbs, they can't tear their food up. They swallow it whole. So especially thinking about some snakes that eat relatively large items, and I'm not talking about like a python eating a deer or a crocodile, because those are also like pretty large snakes, but some of the vipers, and I think this is probably true of the elapids that you have in Australia that are viper-like they have those stocky body shapes, and they eat like they have pretty big heads and they eat relatively large prey items, and it helps them do that because it'll actually start digesting their food from the inside, because otherwise, like, if they eat something too big, it can rot inside them before they have a chance to digest it, which is disgusting and not good for them, apparently. So that's why venom came about. When it is used as a defense, that's secondary and sort of came along later when they're like, hey, this is handy for those big mammals that have been stepping on us and whatnot. And venom is very complex. So it's a mixture of proteins. And, you know, I remember when I was a kid and first learning about venomous snakes, it was divided up to me as like, oh, they are neurotoxic or hemotoxic. And neurotoxic means that it attacks the nervous system. So this is you have trouble breathing. Eventually, it makes your heart stop, your nervous system. And hemotoxic are more these sort of digestive enzymes that cause like those terrible pictures you've seen of like limbs turning black and rotting off and that kind of stuff. Like those are hemotoxic. But yeah, now they've also found out that there are some myotoxins, and I forget exactly how that works in where it used to be that, like, again, the books that I read when I was a kid, they were like classifying snakes as having one of these two types of venom. And lapids, like cobras and all of the venomous sea snakes, all the venomous snakes you have in Australia, coral snakes, those were all neurotoxic, and vipers were all hemotoxic. And it's just not that simple. Like every snake has some sort of mixture of those different components. And it doesn't even vary like just with species, but within a species, like different populations will have slightly different mixtures that probably are related to what they're eating in different places. Although some of the research I've seen, so people here love studying Mojave rattlesnake venom because they're famous for being the most dangerous to humans and having the deadliest venom, which is not true. And that's one of the reasons that scientists like to study it, because there's this myth that's out there about them being so deadly to people, and they're just not. Like hardly anyone has died from a Mojave bite. Most of them don't, like, because some of them have neurotoxins, and that's a scary word, I guess. But their neurotoxins are so weak relative to other things, like it's just not that big deal. But it completely varies. Like you go 50 miles and the snakes have a completely different venom, like more different than you would see between different species. So I can like jump. I feel like I'm jumping all over the place and going off on tangents because it is this like field that you could spend days talking about, and still, like, if I knew how to properly talk about it, could spend days talking about it and still not cover everything. Like there are whole like week-long conferences just on snake venom, and it is fascinating. It's just, yeah, like not my specialty, that I just kind of like sit back, and once they get past going, showing like the chemical makeup of the venom and just like, give me the punchline, give me the evolution, or like, what does it look like in the end? Like that's the part that I sort of get. But yeah, it is pretty wild stuff.
And it's a good reason to leave snakes alone, because there are so many different types of snake venom and so many different antivenoms that you have to use that, if you get bit and they figure out the wrong snake or whatever, you might die just because you get the wrong antivenom. So leave the snake alone. Don't take risks with snakes. If you don't know what it is, leave it alone.
Did you, when you were bitten by that snake, did you have any long-term effects, or are you all well and good?
I have some pretty minor issues in my hand that I think are mainly related to, I didn't get physical therapy started until weeks after I'd gotten bit, and just did the dumb thing of like, well, it hurts, so I'm not going to move it. So I've lost some mobility. Like the snake bit me in between my thumb and first finger, and that like thin bit of skin. So yeah, yep. So that, yeah, it's not, no one notices but me. It's not something anyone else can see, and it does some like weird things when my hand gets cold. Like starting to be one of those old people. It's like, it's gonna rain today.
We have a question from Aunt Jo again. Thank you again, everyone, for interacting on the side chat and everything. Again, if you want to ask any major questions, send me a super chat or a PayPal. But again, as I said, I prefer PayPal because it's quicker and whatever. And all PayPal or super chats gets donated to this particular organization, the ASP. But Aunt Jo does say, are eels in the snake family?
Yeah, and it's a good question. They look like snakes, especially if you've ever seen a sea snake. Like they look a lot like them. But as Stuck in Florida mentioned, they are actually a type of fish. it's just that
Convergent
snake
evolution.
body plan that seems yeah, totally. It's convergent evolution. To us that seems like it would be really challenging, but it works really well in a lot of places. Same thing with like earthworms also superficially look like snakes, but are not vertebrates.
A lot of the sea slugs as well are also a lot longer, so that they take on the same sort of body shape.
Yep.
Okay. I'm just checking last minute things. Is there anything else? So you said you've got a couple of pets, and then after you say that, I think maybe we should consider maybe wrapping this up because you've got to go dinner. So yeah. So you've got some pets?
It's yeah. So we have pets slash animals that we use that my organization uses for education. So we have a gopher snake that we found. I think it's been 15, 16 years now. It's been a while. We've had him a while. He still looks like a little baby because he was injured, which is why we picked him up when we were out hiking, and he's got like this chunk missing out of him. But because we've had him since he was so little, he is the sweetest thing. Like you were describing your snakes, he is my puppy. I describe him that way, and then I always am like, he's way more trustworthy than a puppy. Like I can hand him to any toddler, and I totally trust him. Not always the toddlers, and I've stopped doing that for the most part because the humans are much less trustworthy. But yeah, he's bummed about the pandemic because he didn't get to do any school programs this year and no festivals. Like we had to cancel all that because he loves kids so much. He really comes alive where, and he's being handled. It's adorable. And then we also have a gray-banded king snake, which is a really pretty species that's somewhat rare in the U.S. They're just found in the very southwestern part of Texas and southeastern New Mexico. There's actually only one population in New Mexico, and they're a bit more common in Old Mexico. But really pretty, popular pets, which is actually how I got this one. And she's nice. Like she lets people handle her. She's a fine snake, and I like bringing her out because she's an endangered species. So not a snake that like kids and stuff around here get to see very much. And then we have a rosy boa, which is one of two species of boas that are native. He's really cute. They're very small. I guess similar size maybe to what like the children's pipe gets. Yeah. Like never, I mean, I don't even think they get close to a meter, like maybe a half. And he's probably smaller than that. And like big around is like a thumb, like an adult human thumb or index finger. So he's a sweetie. And then we have a hognose. And like I said, they are mildly venomous. And also she hates me. So she does not do education anymore because I react strongly to her bite. So she gets handled as little as possible and with tools as if she's a rattlesnake now.
I've noticed with my two snakes, so I've got Lilith, who I've had since a hatchling. And almost for the first year, I was the only one who exclusively handled her. So when I give her to someone else, she's like, wants to come and go, hang on, I don't know this person. She crawls towards me. But she's happy to be handled. Like a small child, about I think he's 6 years old, came over and I draped her over his shoulder, and he's like, and I'm like, are you okay? Are you scared? And he's like, no, I'm good. I'm not scared. And I'm like, you so are, but that's quite adorable. While my little one, Thyla, I handle her as often as I can, but my boyfriend Notcha comes over as well, and you can tell that there is a preference for her to hang out with Notcha than it is with me. So I'm being dumped by my own my own pet for my boyfriend. It's quite cute though. Yeah.
That's why you have two.
Uh-oh.
She's frozen.
So
Oh, Mara.
Yeah.
Oh, I thought
Oh,
it was
there we
me
go.
for a sec. Okay.
What?
The stream was still running. You froze for a sec, Mary.
Okay. Oh, I'm sorry.
What were you saying?
I just finished my conversation.
And nobody heard
all right.
it.
Well. When did I freeze?
Thyla, Notcha. So you just got past that.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm just saying that I just get dumped by my own pet for my boyfriend. It's just that was the punchline. Okay. Well, I think that's pretty much everything. So we'll go in reverse, anti-clockwise direction. Jen, who are you? What are you? Why are you? Where are you?
Well, I think most of the people in the chat know me, but not all your subs do, and they'll watch this later. I'm Jen from Jen's Little Corner. I do science, activism, and debunking content over on my channel. I also, I won't talk about the video I made, one of the videos I made this week, but if you want to see a raunchy opening section for a video, go check that out.
That was disturbing. I was like, I don't want to see it. Oh my god.
Hey, I honestly think when the poll voted for that, they honestly didn't think I'd do it, but
Yeah, no, evidently not. Let's keep this monetized here. Let's not say what you're talking about. And Melissa, who are you? What are you? How are you? Where are you? All that sort of jazz.
I'm Melissa Amarillo. I'm the executive director of Advocates for Snake Preservation. You can find us in all the social media places by our name, or at Snake Advocate is our usual handle on stuff. And yeah, we're trying to change how people view and therefore treat snakes. And that's what I do. I love them. And I'm in the wilds of New Mexico in the United States.
Fair enough. And if you don't know who I am, congratulations for living your life a happy place. My name's Meredith. My channel name, of course, is Navadia. I do a whole heap of things, mainly science and atheism, with occasionally snacks. Every once in a while, I do with Jen Scinosium on one of our channels. It depends.
Only yours so far, but yes, we will be doing
only mine so
well.
far. I've been stealing all of the limelight.
That's
so thank you very much to Jen and Melissa for showing up. And I have somebody at my door. Okay, see you later. And don't forget, don't give yourself the raw prawn.
Bye.
Bye.